Welcome to the Protector Culture Podcast with Jimmy Graham. Jimmy is a veteran U.S. Navy SEAL, a former protective officer for the CIA Global Response Staff, founder and CEO of the Able Shepherd Program, a husband and father of 4, and a personal friend of mine. Now here's Jimmy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Protector Culture Podcast with Jimmy Graham. I'm your host. What's my name?
Jimmy Graham.
Jimmy Graham. We did that a couple times to get going here. Today I got Parker Mansour, Able Shepherd 019. What's up, brother? How you doing?
Wonderful. How are you?
I'm good. We're going to be talking about lead mitigation for regular shooters. Obviously, with the protector culture, we call it the protector culture. And if you are a protector, part of what you do may be shooting guns a lot. So there's some concerns with that, just to keep you safe. So we wanted a kind of a public service announcement as we're diving into this stuff and learning more. We figured we'd share it with folks. But first, this episode's brought to you by Able Nation. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget to say it. If you're a protector entrusted with the safety of your church or school, and you're having trouble scraping together the funds for your security training, your safety equipment, or your emergency medical gear, Able Nation can help. What does that mean? It means a lot of people are in that position. They need to do it professionally. They need to do it responsibly. And sometimes it's just a matter of funding. So there is a 501c3 out there dedicated to raising funds to help you out with that. So just contact Neil at able-nation.org and they can help. So back to you, Parker Mansour. So we talked about this. As we were looking into it, we're learning some stuff. We were on a webinar with the folks at Action Target. Good job with that, guys. Learned a lot, so it was a good presentation. But we wanted to share some of this stuff because I learned some stuff, and people should know this to keep their families safe. So
yes, we just kind of dove into it after that webinar, and then learned some stuff on our own personal, testing our folks on what our lead exposure is. Because obviously, if we're shooting on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, we're exposed to lead because bullets are lead. And we've also got some other stuff that come in when we start shooting. Is it's not just the bullet that's covered usually with a jacket, right? A copper jacket or a brass jacket or something that's not exposed lead, but we've got lead that gets aerosolized when we shoot. So when that explosion happens, there's a little bit of lead that gets aerosolized in the air as well. That's when you go to range, they have all the fans and everything blowing everything down range. But so there's a little bit of lead exposure with that. And we looked at this and said we needed to talk about what the mitigations are, the risks are, and what we would have as we are in a range shooting on whatever your cadence would be throughout the course of your protective development, or as you have been shooting from however old you were. So outside or inside, we have some sort of lead exposure.
So there's airborne lead, and then there's also your hands and all that stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah, so talking a little bit about this to kind of start about. So lead is...
First of all, and we're not professionals on this. We dove into it. We're just sharing this. So I don't have any papers in front of me, and he does. So if there's any issues with this, hit him up.
So I'm not a medical professional either, but I consulted with a couple medical professionals for this, and then got a big giant medical journal that has 50 or 60 pages that I've gone through a couple of times and done some research on this, had some conversations. So if I get anything wrong when I say it, I apologize, but this is just kind of what the stuff that we're looking at doing as far as mitigation, information, just get educated on the things that we need to understand when we go to the range or when we come home on a weekly basis, or if we're just going every once in a while, we're taking our entire family to the range. It's important to understand what these pieces are. So what we really want to talk about is like lead toxicity and lead poisoning, that kind of stuff. Not to scare anybody. If you're a frequent shooter, you're probably not at a huge risk. You probably are what would be called exposed to lead. So you're exposed to lead on a regular basis as much as you shoot. But you're probably not going to be at a toxicity level unless you're, chewing on lead bullets, which most people are not going to be doing. So just the toxicity levels are not going to be what the biggest concern is. It's just that prolonged chronic lead exposure, making sure that our levels are going to be good versus a huge, get concerned about, I need to go get chelation therapy or get my lead exposure is really, really high. We are at a low lead level state anyway. So we're a younger state. Most older cities, things like Washington, D.C., New York, have a lot more lead in it because paint was regulated wasn't regulated until 1977. So it was just a lot of lead up until that point. So the older places are going to have more lead exposure. So you're going to kind of see that in numbers when you go get lead tested in your blood, where we wouldn't have that. So our main lead exposure is going to be probably from that shooting piece versus paint in the walls or in the ground or anything like that. But what we're going to talk about is like, if I say lead levels, so BLL is kind of the thing, and then we're looking at microliters or micrograms per deciliter, something like that. Doesn't really, just think about numbers for what they regulate, how much lead is within your blood, because the lead is going to be in your blood. The main things that we are going to get lead exposure and absorption with, or how it actually gets in our body, is going to be inhalation. So through our breathing, getting that aerosolized, and then through our GI tract. So eating, right, or licking, stuff that's on our hands, and then we go to eat something. Things like that are going to be the two main ways that we're going to get lead into our body, and then it gets into our blood, and it has some risks to it when we start talking about numbers, things like that. There's a whole list of things that say, what's good, what's bad, as far as that mcg deciliter level. Anything less than 5 is considered kind of normal. You're not really at risk for a lot of stuff. You're not chronically at risk for things. It could warrant itself if you're continually getting exposed to lead on a regular basis, but it's mainly that 5 to 9 is going to get into a little bit more risk, that we want to do some mitigation pieces. 10 to 19, now we really want to start talking about making some changes in the way that we do things, the way that we handle our clothing, the way that we handle our firearms, the way that we handle our gear, the way that we go to the range, how we come home from the range, what we do when we come home from the range is going to be the biggest thing. If we're getting up into the 20s and beyond, we're probably doing some things we shouldn't be doing, or we are not taking steps to actually wash our hands after we go get done shooting, things like that. And that's somebody that's in the range on 7 days a week, 8-10 hours a day, is something like that could happen from there. So the hobbyist shooter, the protectors that are shooting once a week, that are shooting once a month, every couple of weeks, shooting twice a week, something like that, is probably not going to be a huge risk. The things that we're, when should you get tested, or what is this big concern? What would drive me to get tested? If you're shooting twice a week, I would say maybe on a yearly basis, get your levels checked and just see where you're sitting, and then we can talk about some mitigation pieces from there. If you're sitting anywhere below 5, then you're probably doing okay, because it just means that you're kind of exposed on a regular basis, or whatever they would say, to say I use lead in some things more than most people would be, because lead's not just kind of a common metal that's going to be around. We obviously are having that in the bullets that we're shooting, and then that little aerosolized piece that happens when we actually go and shoot. So that's kind of the general consensus of what's going to happen. And then the lead is absorbed in your blood and the soft tissues and your bones. 1% of it lives kind of in your bones. Most of it's going to live in your blood and your soft tissue pieces. Fatty tissues, I believe, is another thing where lead is going to be absorbed and used. How we actually get lead out of our body is really just less exposure. So less exposure in your body will mitigate that metal and then excrete it through our kidneys and through urine. And most of the treatments that we have for lead therapy is going to be that same kind of thing. Either it's going to be, when we get to a certain level that says we need medical treatment, it's going to be something that takes that lead, filters it out through our urine, and then it leaves our body that way. And we'll get into kind of talking about that chelation therapy as far as what our treatments would be when we get there. But that's more along the lines of when your numbers reach in the 80s or above, you start getting into chelation.
Now, you talked about, right before we came on, you were talking about things that you do that you've changed since we've learned a little bit more about this when you go on the range.
Yeah. So one of the biggest things to think about is who you are and who your family is, or who you're going to be around on a regular basis, like every day, your family, or who you're going to be around after you go shooting. Kids are the biggest risk. When we're adults, it's not as big of a risk when we get lead exposure. Mm-hmm. So when our numbers reach, before that 10 mark, so less than 10, it's not as huge of a risk to us. The biggest risk is going to be children, and then infants and babies that are going to be getting exposed to lead and could cause really bad things. So cognitive issues, tremors, some other symptoms that I don't even know about that have with lead issues. But the biggest thing is now we have cognitive stuff with lead poisoning in infants and children. So we want to really make sure that we're mitigating that. So like me, I've got a brand new baby at home. So the things that I do now for this, because my numbers are a little bit higher, to try to reduce those down, and a half-life of about 30 days is going to be what's rated to get rid of some lead. So it's going to go away pretty quickly unless you're chronically exposed on a very, very regular basis. I don't wear the same clothes in the range that I go home with. So I'll change when I go to the range, and obviously I do this on a daily basis, so it's a little bit easier for me to do that. But I change before I start teaching classes, and then I change after I'm done teaching classes on the live range, and those clothes live for a certain period of time at the range. Then they go into a bag, come home with me separate, and go into the wash by themselves. Something that we can do if you're not going to, teaching classes on a daily basis, if you're just going to go to the range, don't go into your house with your clothes on. So stay in the garage, take your clothes off, change your clothes. Definitely don't wear your shoes in the house because you're going to track a lot of that stuff in to the carpets and to the floors off of your shoes. And the thing about lead is it doesn't go away. Just like a metal, right? It just sits there. It's in the carpet. It's always there until we have it either professionally removed or we remove it with a way to actually lift the lead out of the ground or out of the carpet or the wood floors, things like that. So leave that stuff in the garage, and when you have range clothes, wash them separately. So wash.
Are you planning on doing so? There's soaps like we talked about lead off, the letter D, and then lead. So D-lead makes soaps.
Yep, D-lead. Yep. So I'll have D-lead it's rated as like a hand washing soap, but it's been okayed for clothing wash. So put it in your washer. One of the things that we can do when we put our clothes in our washer, if we wash our lead clothes with our other clothes, now the lead is in everything. So we want to wash the lead exposed items by themselves with the D-lead, and then that will remove all the lead from the washer as well. So now it's technically a clean washer again. And we can go down a dirt road with this and say that it's, I don't wash any of my lead clothes with any washer. Is a separate washer, which is also a possibility, not really realistic for everybody. So just using those D-lead soaps are going to help with removing that from the clothing and removing it from the washer and anything that kind of lays residual from that standpoint.
I think the one of the biggest things you mentioned taking your shoes off, and I just thank Rachel for this one because she didn't let me wear shoes in the house anyways. She's like, hey, get your shoes off. So in the garage, pulling the shoes off because of all the stuff. In some ranges you have the mats that try to glue, like the sticky stuff that grabs some of that off of there. But as you're walking and that stuff's going down there, it's on your feet. Then you walk around in the house, especially here pretty soon, you're gonna have a baby crawling.
Yes.
So when they're crawling and everything goes in their mouth, so messing around on the street, on the floor and all that stuff. Rachel's just she walks around in bare feet. She feels one thing, like one crumb on the floor, and she's washing the whole floor, like just bothers her or whatever. But yeah, just having that in a healthy house, especially when we're on the range, quite a bit. So like casual shooters, like you said, they come out, they spend a couple days on the range, maybe an hour a stint. Not a huge thing, but what was it? We just did this, and it was at $50 at LabCorp or something like that.
$59. You can go to a place called Request a Test. I think it's just requestatest.com. You can look for lead levels. So you want your BLL, your blood lead levels, for a test, and then it can go to Quest or LabCorp or whatever, and you take that in there. Or actually, you don't take anything in. You just register with Request a Test, pay for it. You walk into the LabCorp, whichever place you go to. They do your test and they send it back to you.
I don't want to say mine is like the LabCorp office at Walgreens or something like that.
Yeah.
You waited and you walked in, they drew blood, and you're out of there.
It's quick, 15 minutes, and it's just one tube of blood, and then they can tell you what your lead levels are. And then just understanding what needs to happen from there. If your lead levels are a little bit high, so if you're pushing that 6-7 mark, just start doing some of the mitigation pieces. Don't stop going to the range. I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm just doing some of the mitigation pieces. When you go to the range, have the clothes that you wear on the range, and then have a jacket or an overshirt that you put on after that till you get home if you can't change out. And then all that stuff would go in the washer. Or especially think you go to the range, or the whole family goes to the range. Now everybody's a little bit that way. Take all the clothes, wash all those together, get them out, and then make sure we wash everything. Especially guys, dads and stuff with beards. We want to be careful of that too, because that lead particles can get in the beard. So wash your clothes before you go get in somebody's face, or wash your beard before you go get in somebody's face. Take a shower, something like that. That D-lead soap obviously works as body soap as well, body hair, all that kind of stuff. It just removes the majority of that lead, that metal material.
So one of the things too is if you're a professional in this industry, I've heard horror stories from overseas where people would shoot guns in close. Some of them are parking garages that foreign nationals would turn into shooting ranges, or inside like an old building where they just turn it. So they're blasted with no ventilation. So these guys are like walking around, because it turned into a pencil after a while. So they're just like infected with lead, and then they're spiking, they're going to the hospital, all that kind of stuff, because they're shooting like full auto, they're doing all this crazy stuff. But tell me about the smoke test you recently did, because you want to make sure the filters in the, again, thank you Action Target for educating on this stuff and sharing that knowledge with that. But just like making sure that those HEPA filters are changed out regularly, making sure that the pre-filters, which are really inexpensive filters that they put up there to catch the stuff before, it just extends the life of the HEPA filters. And then you performed a smoke test, and you got some elements. And talk us, what does that look like, and what should they see?
So what you should see is a smoke test. All it is it's a little pod. You light it, and then it just bellows smoke. So just crazy amounts of smoke, but it's not bad for you. It's not, goes lots of smoke, and what we should see is from the shooting line, or from that point forward, we should see that smoke moving downrange at a certain rate. I don't know exactly what that rate is. Action Target has an awesome video that kind of talks about that. It talks about showing, or it actually shows you smoke moving down at a correct rate, so you can compare a video that you take at your range to that video and say, is my smoke moving the same exact, or the same rate that it is in the brand new air filtration system? Yes, then we're good on that. It just needs to, at a certain rate, move all of that environmental exposure of, lead, smoke, fire, all that stuff down range and away from the shooter shooting on the line. The smoke test that we did warranted that even with dirty filters, it was pretty efficient. It was still working, but it works much better with clean filters.
Sure.
Just like your car.
Right? Where'd you get those, Granger? Where'd you get the...
Granger, and I can't remember exactly what they were called. We can probably send something out about those to be able to find those later on, but it's pretty... If you ask Granger, smoke pellets, you just want to look at smoke pellets, lightable, you can hold them a pair of pliers because they get pretty warm.
Cool.
But that's important, making sure that the range is working correctly, because if the range is not working correctly, then we're exposing our customers to more potential lead than we need to. Other thing too is, if you are a regular shooter or you're working on a range a lot and you have worn your shoes in your house and you're just hearing this for the first time, you can get HEPA filters for vacuums, and that's what you want to use to vacuum your carpet. So use a real strong vacuum, and then use a HEPA filter, but don't use shop vacs. Shop vacs push air out as they suck air in. So now you're just aerosolizing more lead as you're using a shop vac, thinking it's stronger, but it needs to have a HEPA filter in it and a good vacuum to be able to pull a lot of that lead particle out.
So for the house, can you use the D-lead soap, or is it the Simple Green stuff, or on a Swiffer? How are we so say somebody just heard this, man, I shoot all the time, never heard any of this stuff. They want to go clean their floor and just whatever.
Yeah, so get one of the things that works really well is a Swiffer. It has the removable pads, so you want to get and if you have just a regular Swiffer, that's fine. You don't need an industrial one or anything. You just want disposable pads that are able to use in dry and wet situations. So we want to have it wet. So if you have hardwood floors and you want to clean those up, Simple Green works fine. You can use the D-lead as well. Just get it in a spray bottle. It'll help. You just kind of wet it down, the whole area down, or where you're going to be kind of pushing that Swiffer around to start. Wet the mop down, or the pad down a little bit. Wet the floor down and just start pushing away the floor to clean it up. Once the pad gets a little bit coloration, dark colors, gets really soaked up with dirt, take it off, put a new one back on, and keep going. Then do everything else again. Once you get a clean pad, your floor is obviously very, very clean, and that lead stuff will be gone. So using D-lead or Simple Green is going to be efficient to do that. The D-lead is going to be a little bit more efficient in kind of mitigating some of that lead. The stuff is fairly expensive. It's roughly around $40-50 a gallon for the standard sand soap that would be used as the laundry soap, and also you could use it on the floors as well. Test it on an inconspicuous spot on floors, though. Don't want to, I don't know what that stuff does specifically to wood floors or sealants or poly or anything like that. Simple Green will be fine for that.
So again, if you mess up your carpet or your floor, talk to the guy that's got highlighted papers, not the guy who's just sipping on coffee.
I'd say talk to the host, the guy that asked me to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, brother. So in a nutshell, let's kind of sum it up is, and feel free to jump in here, but we've done some things pretty well. Like in your safety briefs, you should be having a safety brief when you go to live range anyways. You should be reminding people that they're not eating on the range, not drinking on the range, and afterwards definitely wash your hands. Even if we got a private lesson, afterwards we're like, okay guys, we're not done until we walk in the restroom, we wash our hands with that lead off soap. your clothes. If it's a lesson for an hour, you're shooting, you're at least in the range for an hour, or maybe a 2-hour class, something like that, and maybe. But the clothes that if it's got particulates on it, then you may want to consider changing those out, like Parker does, and streaking through the house. Is that what you do? Just throw it in a bag and just streak through the house, and go, whatever. Cool, America, friend Earth.
My house.
Right. And like Rachel Jean didn't allow me in the house, so pull those boots off before you're coming in. So what your clothing, the particulates from the clothing. The big one's washing your hands, taking those shoes off, not doing that. Anything going in your mouth, like we don't even like water bottles, nothing in the range, because anything that's on there and it touches your mouth, obviously, bad deal. Look at D-lead or lead off. Is the one lead off? Is it one too?
Yeah, lead off is another.
So lead off,
one
and then
there.
D, the letter D dash lead.
You can get these pretty regularly online.
Yeah, I think I saw them on Amazon or whatever. You can get that stuff. It's not very expensive. I think it was 8 ounces concentrate for like $5 or something like that. And then the bigger ones obviously go up. Anything else that we want to consider when we're talking lead?
No, that kind of sums it up. Just the little stuff that we can do to make it a little bit more mitigation on what our exposure would be, the better.
Yeah,
right.
And like you said, you have a baby at the house. It's a big deal. Like, I mean, that's something in the military they taught us. Like, you got little kids, this is a big deal because we shot a lot. So you're shooting a full auto at a lot. It's all over that. They're like, do not wear this stuff in your house because it can rock them, even though you might not see it, and even not test high, it can affect little ones. So just be careful of that.
Yeah, that's the biggest concern.
Cool, and I appreciate it, brother. Because again, as we looked into this, we just want to We just wondered how many people have shot for quite a while and never even thought about this stuff, to where it's not going to be a big deal if you've only done it a little bit. But if you've done it competitively, or you shoot regularly, which we have a lot of people that do, it just might make you a little safer. So check it out. And for $50, or what did you say, $55 for a lead test? Now you know.
Yeah, $59.
Yeah, and just get the truth and mitigate it from there. So cool.
And if your levels are high, like super high, like above 10, you're going to want to do it every 3 months and get tested after you start doing some mitigation. So that would be the last thing that I would want to say.
Cool. So start with that first test.
Yep.
Find out where you're at, and then just kind of go from there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What do we miss, BK?
I'm glad I was on this side. I learned a ton.
Right, as he's chewing on a number 2 pencil. Like, BK, come on, man. Seriously. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Appreciate you. Thanks, brother, for being here.
Of course.
As always, BK, thanks for being here. And remember, guys, to follow us on Facebook at ableshepherd.com. I'm sorry, follow us on Facebook at just Able Shepherd, and then visit us at ableshepherd.com. I want you to check out the Stand in the Gap initiative. We're active on that again and getting that rolling again, standinthegapinitiative.com. Watch this live if you're listening to it on protectorculture.com, and give at our sponsor, able-nation.com. All right, guys, we're checking off. We'll see you again. Until then, God bless you guys. Take care of one another.